We need to talk about Good Boy. It's a new horror movie that is a ghost story with a dog as the main character. It's one of the most viral new films out this year. It was meant to go straight to streaming, but people went so crazy for the trailer that it actually ended up being released in cinemas first. But what happens in it? What is this movie really about? And most importantly, does the dog survive? It's what everyone wants to know, so in this video, I'll tell you. I'll answer questions like what was the monster, what did the ending really mean, and is there a post-credits scene? That's not as crazy as it sounds. I'm MadMorph, and this is my movie club, so like and subscribe to join for more movie deep dives and endings explained. This is a club, so of course let people know in the comments what you thought of this movie, talk about it like it's a book club, and if you haven't seen it yet, let them know what your must-watch movie is for this spooky fall season. And if you like what I do, you can find more of me and my links in the description below or by going to madmorph.com. You can find my gaming channel or my channel where I read books to you to help you sleep. This movie definitely has an ending that has audiences saying, what did I just watch? And I'm gonna explain it to you. I'll let you know what the director said about it, and I've got a crazy theory of my own that I haven't seen anyone else talking about. Now, did you know that the dog in this movie is actually the director's own? The film took 400 days spread over 3 years to make because the dog could only work for 2 hours a day. That is commitment, and this movie deserves our attention, so sit, stay. This is Good Boy Explained. The movie opens with Indy, our hero, the dog, snoozing on a couch, and his owner's phone starts to vibrate. We see the owner sat upright but not moving, and there are noises coming from outside. The dog sits protectively in front of his owner, and the owner's nose starts to drip and then gush blood. This is Todd, and there is something wrong with him. His sister arrives and finds him like that, and we're treated to a montage of Indy growing up to start the movie. Because it's the director's own dog, I assume this is all actual real footage of Indy as a puppy through the years, and it's really heartwarming, but then it turns dark. Indy watches the owner coughing blood into the trash and going to hospital visits. The movie then starts properly with Indy sat alone in a car whilst Todd is on the phone outside in the rain. Through the back windshield, Indy can see a dark figure of a person watching him through the window. Everything in this movie is from the dog's perspective, and the dog appears in every single scene. Seeing the ghost is interesting because where a human character would scream or react or say, "What is that?" the dog just looks pensive, worried, and it's up to us as the audience to fear for the helplessness of him, that we understand that that is not something that's normal. It seems like Todd is ignoring his sister's calls and texts and has basically run away with Indy to the old family home. It's boarded up with a stay out on the door, and Indy can hear a dog whining from the cellar, but the owner doesn't react to this. Is Indy seeing things that aren't really there? The house is a mess with a spooky basement, and Todd watches old home movies of his grandfather who lived here before, revealing that he lived here with a dog called Bandit. As the night passes, Indy keeps seeing shadows of the ghostly figure in the house. When lightning strikes and it lights up a corner of the room, we see the figure of a person, all shaded and silhouetted in black. We explore this spooky home from the perspective of the dog with heightened senses as he stares into dark corners and hears creaking chairs. The next day they go for a walk in the woods, and a strange figure creeps up on Indy, but it turns out to be a neighbor who is an overly enthusiastic outdoorsman. He warns them he has traps and snares all over the woods. I wonder what will happen. Turns out he knew Todd from coming to the family home here as a kid, and mentions finding the grandpa's body in the house, but they never found the dog. While this is going on, Indy is crawling into a sort of fallen tree stump and sees some eerie eyes lighting up in the darkness. We can assume this is some wildlife, and what's interesting about this movie is seeing things from the perspective of the dog, how the smells, sounds, and sights make everything seem spookier and threatening. This could lead you to believe that this movie is going to be just seeing normal things from the perspective of a dog, which makes them seem like a horror movie. But that is not the case. There is a lot more to this story than the dog thinking it's seeing spooky things. Todd's sister calls him and is asking if Indy has been acting weird, if he's been staring at nothing or sniffing for things he can't find. But she doesn't mean ghosts. She's worried about Todd because dogs are known to detect things that are wrong with people. We see Indy fall asleep, and he has a dream of the dog who lived here before, Bandit, a golden lab wearing a red neck scarf. In the morning we get more clues because Indy sniffs at the basement door, and on the other side we see lots of scratches, as if something was trying to get out. But then Todd leaves for the day, and Indy sits at the window watching, and it match cuts to nighttime. Indy is sat in the exact same place, and Todd hasn't come home. It's a really relatable little horror for any pet owner of your cat or dog or anything else just sat waiting and watching for you all day. Do they pine for you? Do they miss you? And Indy clearly loves his owner very, very much. While sat there at night, Indy hears whining from the basement again and sees Bandit, the other dog, in the house. He follows this ghostly apparition of a dog upstairs and crawls under a wardrobe and finds the red scarf, but is interrupted when someone starts slowly stomping up the stairs to where Indy is, so he hides under the bed. But it turns out to be Todd, who's not feeling very well, which explains the stomping and slow reaching like a zombie as he came into the room. Your first read of the previous scene might be that Indy had the scent of Bandit from sniffing under the basement, and that's why he saw the ghost of them. That the ghost of Bandit is actually symbolic of the scent trail that leads Indy under the wardrobe to find Bandit's old scarf. That makes sense, but might not be entirely the case. We'll talk about this one at the end. We watch as Indy has concern for his owner that lays in bed coughing and has a bandage on his arm that is seeping blood. Indy wants to comfort him, but he keeps telling him, "Not now, give me a minute," until he grabs Indy and pushes him away and says, "Get out of here." But Indy just sadly gets off the bed and lays down and keeps watch over his owner until he falls asleep and has another dream. In the dream, he's on the cemetery, which is on the grounds of the house, where the family are buried, but when he wakes up, he finds his owner banging his head against the basement door. Indy wakes him with a gentle boop of his nose to his hand, and that breaks Todd out of his sort of sleepwalking, strange state, and they go back to bed. This is when things start to get weird, as Indy explores the house and finds the grandfather's old chair and can see a vision of the grandpa in the chair coughing and spluttering up blood just like Todd does. And the poor pup pees himself a little before a dark figure rises up behind him and we cut to black. And we don't actually know what happens here. We return with Todd finding Indy in the basement covered in black dirt and mud and gives him a bath. And Todd even says to him, "You smell like death." And then he coughs blood all over Indy's face and into the bath. In the next scene, Indy is watching his owner get an MRI scan at the hospital and then being told that it's too late. That if he had come earlier before it progressed, then maybe, but he's too far gone for medical trials. Indy is whining in his lap and struggling until Todd gets angry and puts him down on the floor and shouts. And when Todd puts Indy on the floor, we see from Indy's perspective that he changes. He changes from a human into the silhouetted mudman and back again. This is what's been going on the whole time. Todd is sick, just like his sister was worried about, and his dog is sensing the sickness and the danger to his owner. We watch as Todd picks herbs, lights candles, burns sage, and fills the house with plants, trying to make the environment more healthy. Crystals hang everywhere, and we see Todd just desperately trying things to cure himself before he sits down on the bed and cries and gives Indy a big hug. It's actually a really sad and powerful and moving moment. It's not the only one that happens in this movie, but it's really sad and it's so relatable to so many people. We watch as night falls and Todd puts Indy on the floor to go to sleep, and Indy dreams of going to the basement again, called by his owner's distinctive whistle. But when he does, he finds Todd at the bottom of the steps, having fallen and died. Indy wakes up from his nightmare still laying on the floor at the bottom of Todd's bed, but then he's grabbed by a hand from beneath the bed. It's a pretty effective jump scare because you're just not expecting it at all, but it turns out it's Todd. He's fallen out of bed, he's unwell, and seems to be half asleep or having some kind of seizure, similar to when he was banging his head on the basement door. He's hugging Indy whilst in this state, and that seems to bring him out of it whilst Indy is panicking and seeing the silhouetted shadow man walking around in the house. But here's what's different this time. Todd senses it too. He even calls out hello to see if anyone is there. Then Indy growls, and when Todd strokes his head to comfort him, he feels it as the muddy tar hand and bites his owner, who then gets angry with him and storms off into the other room. And as he does this, it seems like he himself actually sees the mud monster. Splats of this black goo are hitting the floor, and as Todd looks up, he sees it crawling over the wardrobe and he passes out on the floor. Indy goes to rush to help, but the door slams in the dog's face. He wants to save his owner, so he climbs out of the bathroom window and immediately slips off the roof and hits the ground. This is a moment that made me hold my breath and tear up a little in the mere 7 seconds of silence it takes where everything is still before Indy emerges from the bush okay and starts to run for help. This is a moment where everyone just gasps and is waiting for the main character to be okay, and it was really well done. Indy sprints through the woods to the neighbor's house but gets caught in one of his stupid hunting snares and is set upon by a shadow man. Again, there is a bit of a time jump where it is unclear of what is happening in between, because we wake up with Indy in the doghouse figuratively and literally outside on a chain. His owner says, "I told you to stay." We have to assume it was either his owner who found him in the snare and saved him, or the neighbor was alerted, came out, released him from the snare, and actually came back with him and helped Todd. Todd throws Indy a bowl, fills it up with food, and goes inside, leaving him outside in the pouring rain. And whilst he's out there, he's haunted and stalked by this mudman, and runs and pulls so hard that he breaks the doghouse and gets loose. Indy is desperate to get back to his owner, and the only way into the house is through the cellar, which is closed. And Indy looks up at the house and then hears a dog bark and looks down at the cellar, and now the door is open. He heads through the cellar doors and at the bottom of the stairs finds the body of Bandit. The body has clearly been here for a while, and it's still wearing the red scarf. He's been stuck in here ever since the grandfather died. Was the ghost of Bandit helping Indy and opening the doors for him? We'll talk about it at the end. For now, Todd is struggling to breathe and wakes up in bed as the candles in the room go out one by one. This spooks Todd, who stares into the darkness, expecting the mudman to come for him, but it's Indy. His dog has returned to him somehow, and he gives him a big hug and apologizes for putting him outside. Todd keeps asking him, "How did you even get in here?" whilst Indy whines sadly. When Todd lifts his lamp to see a bit better, he finds his own dead body in the bed. He's died in his sleep and is now a ghost. As Indy stares at him, a chain appears around Todd's neck, and the muddy shadow person comes from behind and drags him through the house and into the basement, with Indy chasing the whole time, trying to save his owner. The basement door slams in Indy's face, so he literally jumps through a glass window to get outside and go down into the cellar again. Now in the cellar or basement, there is a strange cave entrance in the wall, and he can hear his owner screaming from inside. It's all suddenly got very dark and very weird as the dog fearlessly runs into the cave and pulls his owner out, both of them covered in the dirt from before. Now the mucky monster appears, but not from the cave, from the basement door, and it starts to walk towards them, and as it does, the mud starts to take over Todd, crawling up his hands until it covers him from head to toe. Until the only thing we can see is his eyes, and he looks at Indy and says, "You're a good dog." Indy looks back sadly, whines, and tries to go to him, but the owner says, "You can't save me. You've got to stay here." And Indy watches as his owner is pulled back towards the cave, and the mud covers his face, and we see Todd's skull for a second through the mud. Now Indy is trapped in the basement. The door to the outside has shut, and he sits down at the mouth of the cave waiting for his owner, implying that this exact same thing might have happened to the grandfather and Bandit before him. And for a moment you really do worry that this is where the film is going to end, as Indy just sits patiently and you think, "Oh no, please don't do this to me." It made me think of the true story of the dog in Japan, Hachiko, who went to the same station every day for 9 years waiting for his owner to return, but he never did because he had died. The dog went to the same station every day for 9 years and 9 months until the dog died itself, and I think this is what this moment is referencing, as well as the death of Bandit. But luckily for all of us, they're not going to ruin our day like that, and Vera the sister shows up and opens the cellar door and calls to Indy through tears. Vera is crying and calling to him. It's clear she's already discovered her dead brother's body and is looking for Indy. "Come on baby, let's go," she calls. Still, Indy sits at the bottom of the stairs like a good boy. He's conflicted about what to do. He turns back and he hears his owner's whistle from the cave, and then bounds up the stairs out of shot to the sister, and the movie ends. The ending is really moving and powerful, especially for a movie like this. Both times I've watched this movie, I've got choked up at the end. It's beautiful and it's haunting. It shows how good and loving and loyal dogs are, and that most of us don't deserve them. We all know he would have sat there just like Bandit did and waited until he died too. The whistle from the owner felt almost like Todd giving permission from the afterlife for Indy to leave. Plus, the big emotion is relief because the dog survives, and the credits roll whilst we watch as Indy enjoys having his head out of the window as the sister drives him away from this spooky haunted house. But what does this all mean? What was the movie really about? And what happens after the movie ends? What is next for Indy? Let's get into it and answer your questions, but before we do, now is a great time to hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already for more like this. And this is a movie club, so be sure to let everyone know in the comments what you thought of this film and its ending, and let me know what film you would love to see me deep dive into next. The ending itself and the entire movie depends on how figuratively or literally you as the audience want to approach this story. What we know for sure is that this is a movie about a dog's love for its owner, his loyalty, and the panic and eventual grief watching an owner get sick and die. The seed of this film is knowing that dogs are known to smell sickness and cancer in humans, reports of them constantly sniffing at a point on their owner that turned out to be a tumor, and the movie is symbolic of that. The shadows, the muddy tar person and monster that appear are representative of the sickness and of death. It looms from the start of the movie, further away, getting closer and closer as we go through the story until it quite literally drags the spirit of his owner into the underworld. But was it real or just an artistic interpretation? Was it a dog's grief told as a ghost story, or were some of the hauntings real? Did this happen before to Bandit and the grandfather? One interpretation is that the exact same thing happened, but nobody bothered to come and get Bandit. He was left in the cellar until he died. We know from earlier that they retrieved the grandpa's body, and the implication is that it's not the body that goes into the cellar, but the spirit, and that is what the dog follows down. We see Todd's body still in the bed at the end of the movie. That was his spirit that Indy followed down into the basement. The other way of thinking about it is that the grandfather started to act sick and erratic like Todd. It may have even been a hereditary disease and may have shut Bandit in the basement to get some peace and quiet, the same way that Todd shut Indy outside. I think there is a really interesting contrast with Todd putting Indy into the nice doghouse and with food and water outside. I think he knew he was going to die and he wanted to make sure he was found. At this point, Todd is very, very close to death, and in fact, the next time Indy sees him, he doesn't see him, he sees his ghost. Todd is already dead in the bed. I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle, with it really depending on what you believe. The film is intentionally vague. I mean, Indy jumps through a glass window but shows no signs of damage at the end. These unexplainable moments are the kind of thing that might stick with you if this wasn't a ghost story. Remember, ghost stories are meant to be slightly unknowable. The best novels and TV shows and movies that are of this ilk are very gothic and unexplained. There's lots of little happenings that you're never quite sure what's going on. The best ghost stories aren't always focused on telling a cohesive or coherent story from point A to point B. We loop around, things happen that you just don't know what's going on with, and it's to make you feel uneasy, it's to make you feel uncertain, and to raise questions in your mind, that unknown which is the greatest fear. I think it's valid if some people don't make that connection and they get annoyed at the time jumps and the things that happen that can't be explained in this movie and look at them as plot holes, but I would remind them to look at this like a gothic ghost story. For me, I think the silhouette that turns into the Mudman is Indy's way of sensing and perceiving the sickness that is in his owner, and I like to think that he really did experience a true ghost story at the end, seeing his owner's ghost after he passed and then following him down into the basement. Personally, I prefer to choose the ghost story ending, but what about you? What do you think really happened? Let everyone know in a comment. But here's what you might have missed on your first watch. What did Todd die of? This is not a new diagnosis for Todd. In fact, his sickness is his whole reason for running away. It's revealed through clues that it's something he's had before, beaten most likely, and now it has returned. A worried text from his sister Vera says, "Did it come back?" It's very likely this is referring to a recurrence of his disease, perhaps cancer, explaining why Todd's run away to his family home, unable to deal with this terrible news, and why his sister is so worried about him. The images you see at the beginning of him going to hospital were the first time he got sick, and him facing it and dealing with it, but this time he ran away. Sadder and darker still, it's crazy theory time. If we think about the other clues, I think it's very possible that Todd might have decided to go out on his own terms. Let me explain. He's told by the hospital there's nothing they can do. He leaves Indy outside with food and water waiting to be discovered. He starts and runs the generator outside in the rain, and earlier the neighbor told him, "Don't run it in the rain, it's very dangerous to run like that." A disregard for his own safety. Before he heads inside, we see him fall onto the bed, dropping multiple bottles of pills. We see these empty bottles all over the floor when Indy comes in to find his ghost. His phone is blowing up from his sister Vera asking where he is and demanding that he call her. Missed calls and texts blowing his phone up trying to contact him. The kind of thing you might do if someone sent you a worrying goodbye message or note. Especially in the middle of the night. Further evidence of this is the fact that she shows up the next morning and finds Todd dead and Indy in the cellar. Why would she rush over? Is this a reach, or what do you think? Let me know in a comment. It definitely puts a dark twist on things, but here's what the director said about the ending. He said it is Indy choosing the light over the dark. He could stay in the basement with his owner just like Bandit did until he also died, or he can choose the light. He chooses life and he goes to Vera. While the dog before him, Bandit, chose the wrong decision and stayed and died. Now, the director hasn't spoken directly on my theory, which I've just come up with, but wouldn't it be poetic if we also have the antithesis of that message where the owner has chosen death? Personally, I think there's something there, but it might be something they're not talking about because it's a pretty dark twist on a tale that is being marketed as the horror movie with the dog, and it's gone more viral than they were expecting. It wouldn't surprise me if they were like, hey, don't mention the super dark themes, just keep it light. But am I crazy? That's my personal theory. Let me know what you think in a comment. But what comes next for Indy? Well, there is actually a big clue as to what happens next. At one point, Todd is watching home movies of the grandfather and he's doing his last will and testament on tape, in which he leaves everything to Todd but one thing to the sister. The grandfather sits in his chair and says, I leave all of my taxidermy to Vera, the vegan. This is not just a bit of a mean jab from a departing grandfather, but also clues us, the audience, in to what Vera is like. We can rest assured that Indy is going to be well taken care of. As for the post-credits, if you stay, you get treated to some behind the scenes of how they made the film. Working with a dog actor, I'm sure, is never easy, but I love this movie and I really loved knowing that it was the director's dog and that they shot this over a period of years. I think that's a really nice thing, and this movie deserves the success and give Indy all of the awards. I really hope they do something at the awards ceremonies honorary for this dog, the same way that they did for the dog in Anatomy of a Fall. That dog was everywhere during awards season, and I think whoever distributed this film should really make a push for Indy to be appearing during awards season and get this film seen by more people. It's a beautiful movie with a beautiful message, and he most certainly is a very good boy. And that is Good Boy Explained. Thank you so much for joining me for this one. I thought it was a nice ghost story for spooky season. I hope you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed the movie. Click one of those videos on the screen for another Ending Explained deep dive with me, or check out my other channels in the description. Got a gaming channel and a podcast where I read books to help you sleep, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being here. Until then, remember, it'll all be okay in the end, and if it's not okay, it's not the end. Good night.